This episode of Earl Grey is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/Trek.fm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org.
Hi, I'm Melinda Snodgrass, the writer of The Measure of a Man for Star Trek Next Generation, and you're listening to Trek.fm.
Tea Earl Grey hot.
Welcome to another episode of Earl Grey, Trek.fm's dedicated podcast to the next generation. I'm your host, Justin Ozer, and join with me today are Amy Nelson and Richard Marquez. How are you doing today, Amy?
I am doing great. I'm so very excited for your hard work in getting us an interview today. So looking forward to talking with...
Oh, thank you.
With? I don't know. Do I say it? No, I'll let you say it.
An interview with Melinda Snodgrass, who's most well known for writing the amazing episode, The Measure of a Man. So we're very excited to interview her here today. But first, Richard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to get this started.
All right, excellent. So with a short introduction, we'll just take you right into the interview. Today on Earl Grey, we have a very special guest, Star Trek The Next Generation writer Melinda Snodgrass, who is probably best known to Star Trek fans as the writer of one of the most acclaimed episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, The Measure of a Man. Melinda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be visiting with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. So I wanted to start out by asking you, how did your writing career start?
Oh, gosh. I have been fortunate in my friends, is basically where it started. I was an extremely unhappy attorney. I was a lawyer before I turned to writing. And at the time, I had a very dear friend, Victor Milan, who is one of our Wild Cards writers, who said to me, you know, I bet you could write if you tried because you're very artistic. Because before I'd gone to law school, I'd studied opera in Vienna. I was going to be a singer, except I'm not exactly built for it. So he encouraged me, and I started writing novels sort of in secret to see if I was any good. And I managed to sell a science fiction novel, and then I decided this was what I really wanted to do because writers are the most interesting people in the world. And spending time with them was just so much more attractive than spending time with lawyers who were just talking about their billable hours. So I started writing novels, and I did that for a number of years. And then my best friend, George R.R. Martin, who had moved down to New Mexico, and we'd gotten to know each other, George went off to Hollywood to write first on the new Twilight Zone and then on Beauty and the Beast. And George called me one day, and he said, hey, that's his nickname for me. He said, hey, Snod, I think you'd be pretty good at this screenwriting thing because you do very fine, strong dialogue, you have very powerful characters, and you are an architect. You plot everything, and that seems to be, that's the big deal out here in Hollywood. If you write a script, I'll show it to my agent. So, like I said, I've been fortunate in my friends between Victor getting me into novels and George getting me into Hollywood. I'm very grateful to both of them.
Wow. So I'm really curious, like, what made you want to write a Star Trek script? Like, did you watch Star Trek? Tell us about that.
When I was a kid, when I was a little kid, the original Trek came on the air. And I will never forget that first show because I had been reading science fiction since I was 7. First novel I ever read was A Princess of Mars, all by myself without my dad or mom helping me. I adored science fiction. And suddenly here was a visual of what I'd been dreaming about for my entire, short life at that point. And I loved the original series. I adored Kirk and Spock and McCoy. And so when George offered me this opportunity, I had three choices. I thought about doing an LA Law spec script, and I can talk more about spec scripts in a minute, because I had been an attorney, but I thought, that show looks like they've plotted way in advance. I think it's going to be very hard to sort of sneak in with an episode. I didn't want to write a Beauty and the Beast script because I thought that was very unfair to my friend, because if I wrote a really crappy script, then George was going to have to either tell me it was crappy or show it to his bosses and have them say, wow, this is terrible. Why are you bringing this to me? And of course, Next Generation had just come on the air. So I thought, well, I'm an old time Star Trek fan. I love it. I actually hadn't watched the show, I'm embarrassed to say, but I sat down and I started watching and recording episodes, and I immediately had an idea for a script because I found Data to be the most interesting character, which, as I've said, is kind of sad considering that he was a robot, and he was one of the more intriguing and interesting characters with more possibilities, I guess. And because of my legal training, I had this idea of applying the Dred Scott decision to Data and his relationship with Starfleet Command. And for those of you who don't know, the Dred Scott decision was one of the most infamous Supreme Court decisions where the court, I believe it was Chief Justice Taney, ruled that a runaway slave was not a person, he was property, and therefore returned him to his owner. And I just thought that would apply very, very well for Data. So I sat down to write the script, and I think in my heart, in my mind, I pictured it as an original Trek episode, those kind of feelings where, McCoy and Spock and Kirk had this wonderful tension, between each other with different, where they favored or believed in different things, and they debated these issues. And so that's what I did. And I also had a good friend who's a retired Navy officer who gave me the key that made the script work so well. He said to me, when we're at sea, when we're a ship at sea and we don't have access to a JAG officer, the captain always defends and the first officer always prosecutes. And so I had tension, I had drama between, Picard and Riker.
Yeah, perfect. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that, because I think before you had written novels, and was this the first time you had really written something for TV?
Yes. Yes, it was. My first attempt, I didn't get the format right. I was trying, but I didn't do it right. And then I had to redo it quickly because it was way too long so that George could show it to his agent. At the time, we didn't have these wonderful screenwriting programs like we have now. I use Final Draft, which is the industry standard. But at the time, I think we were using this thing called Scripter, and it was not as user-friendly. But, I finally got it done, and I gave George the script, and he handed it off to his agent, at which point the writer's strike hit, and then everything shut down for 6 months, and I completely forgot about it. I went back to work on my novels and riding my horses and living, being in my role-playing group and, with George and Vic and Walter John Williams and people, and then out of the blue, I got this call from George's agent after the strike ended saying, Star Trek wants to meet with you. How soon can you get out to LA? That was how it started. It launched my Hollywood career.
Yeah. Now, you'd mentioned something about a spec script, and what is that?
Yeah, well, back in the day, we still write spec scripts, and young aspiring writers will write a spec script to try to attract an agent or a manager's interest or to show to a producer. But at the time when I broke in, it was recommended that you write a spec script for an existing television show. And George explained to me that this was like your calling card, that this would present you and your work and your talent to people. But he said to me, you never, ever sell your spec script. Never, ever, ever. You will not sell it. And he said, so what you do is you write your spec, and then you hope that it's good enough they wanted to meet with you. And then if they do, you come in with 3 to 5 other ideas for episodes that you've sort of fleshed out to varying degrees of detail, and you pitch those because you're never, ever going to sell your spec script. And that's when George gave me one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten as a writer. I said to him, George, I have this idea for a script, and I think it's pretty terrific, and maybe I shouldn't waste it on the spec. Maybe I should save it for the pitch. And he said to me, Melinda, always lead with the very best thing you've got, the thing you are most passionate about. So rather than holding off, I wrote The Measure of a Man as my spec. And then I sold it. And then not only did I sell it, after Maury had worked with me for about 3 hours one day, giving me notes and me coming up with solutions to their problems with the script, he said to me, I'm hiring you. You start on Monday. And that was on Thursday in LA. So I had the one case where lightning struck. And I did sell my spec script, and it did launch my career. So, but at the time, it was a different world. Like I said, today, agents and managers and producers like to see a writer's own vision rather than have you write an episode of, Daredevil or Jessica Jones or The Flash or whatever your interest is. They really want to see a spec TV pilot out of a young writer, a spec feature, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm curious about a couple of things about the episode, The Measure of a Man. There are a couple of characters in there that we haven't seen before, Philippe Lavoie and Commander Bruce Maddox. And I wondered, if there was, an inspiration you had for those particular characters.
I wanted a scientist who was so lost in the science that he had forgotten his humanity, and that he has an arc too. And I wanted him to have a bit of an arc in the story, that at the end he goes from calling Data it to calling him him. And with Philippa, I just wanted a really smart, powerful woman who was Picard's equal, and who had the ability to stand toe-to-toe with him. And that was really all that was behind it. And, I allude to this thing that happened in their past that I didn't flesh it out. I didn't go into it because you never, ever play the backstory. But I just wanted that sense of tension that, things had happened between them that you never really talk about, but it's there. And, I was so blessed in my actors. I mean, my God, they were all wonderful. Everybody I thought turned in just a tremendous performance. And I was so grateful that Jonathan Jonathan's really a very fine actor, and he certainly is a great director. And, this gave him the chance to actually, show some of his chops too, So I was very fortunate to have such terrific actors delivering my lines.
Yeah, so I'm also curious, at that time, as the writer of the episode, were you just working with the writers and producers, or was it the case that you would be, on set at all, or how did it work at that time?
Star Trek was an odd show. We really weren't permitted on the set, which was a very strange thing. I didn't know because this was my first job. I did get on the set once or twice. My boss, Morris Hurley, took me over. And I've got to tell you, I had a huge high the first time I saw one of my novels on sale in a bookstore, and it was real. But it was nothing compared to standing on a sound stage and hearing actors deliver your dialogue. That is the most amazing high I've ever had in my life. So I was there a little, but the good thing was that because they hired me so quickly, I was able to do all of the rewriting, all of the notes that were necessary so the script stayed mine. It was not rewritten by the staff because I was suddenly part of the staff. For example, I had to invent the poker game because the original teaser that I had for the script wouldn't work. One, they couldn't go off set to find a swimming pool, and two, Brent's makeup would have come off if they had done the thing I had written. So I needed to come up with something where you can study all the theory and still not be able to do it. And I was thinking that swimming was a nice, Data was like, I've read all the books on swimming. And of course, he gets in the swimming pool, he sinks like a stone because he was supposed to weigh like 400 pounds. And when they couldn't do that, I had to come up with something else. And so, I came up with Poker Game.
Yeah, and that is I think the first time we see a poker game on the Next Generation, right?
That is the first time that they did the poker game, yes.
And it kept, and you kept seeing them in poker games right up until the last episode, All Good Things. So I mean, I think that's one of the things that we think about when we think of the Next Generation, them playing poker in these different episodes.
Yeah, it's sort of ironic that that's the one thing that was out of desperation became this trope, through the thing. But such is television. I mean, it's like doing a high wire act while you're laying track for a train that's 500 feet behind you, because especially now with the new model where you're doing 8 or 10 episodes, maybe 12 or 13, it isn't as intense. But boy, when you're doing 22 episodes on the air, the schedule is crazy.
Yeah. So, I'm also curious. So, you wrote this episode, you're on the staff, you're making the changes to it, it got filmed and it was released. So, I think, as I said at the top of the interview, it's considered to be, the most acclaimed, one of the best episodes in the whole franchise. Like, how was it received at the time?
I think everybody knew there was something fairly special about it, because the director deliberately, when he created his director's cut, he kept in all the scenes, and the show was 13 minutes too long because they'd never shot anything like that. And he had made the decision to shoot all the scenes, even though he knew it was running long. So, I don't think I realized it at the time. It wasn't until later when, we started getting, information that had been placed in a museum of AI, in Paris, France, and all these other things, that it had become this event. I think that when I look back on it, I just tried to write something that shed light on the human condition, and that was about the human heart in conflict with itself, because that's the essence of good drama. So, that was, and at the time, of course, by then I was buried in trying to keep up with the show and learn how to work TV, which was a brand new experience. And we were working 12, 14 hours a day. I would get out of work at 8 at night and go over to where George was. His office was just down the street from Paramount for Beauty and the Beast, and then we would meet and go to dinner at 9 o'clock at night. Television is an industry that eats its young, there's no doubt. So I don't think I realized at the time that this was going to be quite such a thing,
So one of my other favorite ones of yours is The High Ground. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And I feel like some people say that it's too bonk on the head, but I love The High Ground and how you twisted to see this terrorist on the other side from the different perspective.
I hate to admit this. I really don't have a strong impression of what exactly I did. I feel so embarrassed to admit that, but I really, really don't. I think I got pulled into it. It's very collaborative, and when you have a good staff, that's wonderful. But again, I think I always fall back on that, what does this say about the human condition, and how do I explicate the human heart in conflict with self? And so I wish I could be more helpful, but I really can't. And it has been a long time.
Yeah.
So forgive me, but I truly don't remember.
That's all right. Well, maybe I can ask a question this way. So, for the different episodes that you worked on The Next Generation, besides A Measure of a Man, which we've just talked about, do you have, any favorite moments, in that process or the making of those episodes?
I really enjoyed working. There was a story out there that became Pen Pals, and the story already existed, and Maury gave it to me to write. I was the only woman on the staff, and I think that, sometimes let Melinda write the touchy-feely stuff. Here we go. And I enjoyed writing Pen Pals. And I sort of have my version of My City on the Edge of Forever. The one that I really regret was The Ensigns of Command, which was a script I really liked that I think did not come out at all how I had hoped. And in fact, I kind of took a leaf from Harlan, and my version of the script is actually up on my website, because there was some misunderstandings about, I had been requested by Gene to have Data get laid again. I got it. I mean, what I want to do was Shane. I wanted to do the tall dark stranger comes to town, and a young woman is just amazed by him. And I never intended for, Data to get laid. I just wanted this young woman to have this tremendous crush on somebody who came from the stars, who was literally so exciting. And then Gene said, let them do their thing. And so I wandered around. I mean, I literally paced a hole in my office carpet trying to figure out, okay, how do I logically get a robot to take this woman to bed? And if you look at my version of the script, it is very clear that it is Data working through point A leads to point B, which leads to point C. But there was this misunderstanding that I had made Data emotional, which I hadn't. And my then boss was the forgotten man of Star Trek, not Michael Piller. He was just before Michael Piller. Anyway, he only lasted 6 weeks. But, Michael tried to defend my script, and it just turned into a giant hysterical thing. So I feel like that one did not come out as well as I had hoped. I did have fun with the legal stuff with the aliens, with the very legalistic society. But I think I lost the heart of what I wanted to do with Data.
Interesting.
So, that was...
Yeah, because actually we were talking about the Ensigns of Command a little before, we started interviewing you, and we actually liked that episode quite a bit. But it'll definitely be interesting to read your original screenplay and see what it was like.
Go read my version. Yeah, it's up on my website under writing, along with my Mass Effect fan story. God help me. I love video games too. So, and I became very frustrated with the end of the third Mass Effect game, and so I wrote my own ending.
Interesting. So,
yeah, I know. As if I don't have enough to do, I had to write, I don't know how many thousands of words of a fanfic, for a video game. But sometimes you just have to.
So, actually, Richard, I want to see if you have a question.
Well, all of them were actually for the high ground, but if she can't remember.
And I can't be helpful. I'm so sorry. Maybe I ought to go back and rewatch that episode. I mean, I have a terrible confession to make, and I'm sure this comes as no shock to anybody who, knows Star Trek. It was a very difficult show. It was a very difficult experience behind the scene. And, as a result, I was pretty burned out on Star Trek. I never watched a single episode after I left the show of any of the shows. I came back to watch the J.J. Abrams movies. Sometimes I was really sorry, but I could not be in that space anymore. And so, it's perhaps I will, dial that up on Netflix and try to remember what it was I did.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the things that episode is known for is there's a mention of an Irish unification in 2024. So it was actually banned in the UK for a number of years because of that reference.
Yeah. I do remember that. You have to look at where the world is going, and right now, unfortunately, it feels like it's spinning apart rather than,
coming
unifying.
together.
So,
yeah.
Sadly, I want the Federation. I really do. I would like to be able to call myself an Earth woman uh, instead of individual countries. But someday, maybe we'll get there.
Well, it sounds like that Data is, one of your favorite characters. Are there other characters that you enjoyed writing script for?
Data did hold my heart, definitely. I really enjoyed writing for Worf, and I really enjoyed writing for Riker. I felt like that was an underutilized character, and I just wish he could have been given a little bit more depth. And I know this isn't popular. I loved writing for Pulaski because Diana Muldaur is one of the great actresses.
Yes, she is.
Extraordinary talent and professionalism. And I really liked writing for her because she had sharp edges, And one of our biggest problems on the show, and again, I'm not telling tales out of school, I've given other interviews, is that there was no conflict. And the essence of drama is conflict. And Gene said to us in one meeting, my people are perfect, they have no flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, we don't know how to write stories about people that don't have any flaws. And I think back on the original show where there were real disagreements. They cared for each other, but Kirk and Spock and McCoy, they had sharp elbows. They threw elbows
they were constantly at each other every episode, right? Practically.
Yeah, and then interesting issues were discussed, and when everybody just blandly agrees, truthfully, we were very lucky that Measure got through the way it did. Gene was unavailable for the 6 weeks while we were prepping and shooting that show, because in Gene's universe, he literally said to me, there are no lawyers in the 24th century, and I said, that's not possible. The law underpins everything. And even if you assume that there is no criminals because we've made their minds right or whatever it was, their attitude was that Gene had, you still have to negotiate contracts.
Right.
People, treaties have to be done. Things have to happen that lawyers and the law are the essence of civilization. So that didn't make any sense to me. And a part of the problem too is, we got really tired of the magic stuff coming out of the walls. Want anything? There is no want. Literally we were breaking a story one day and our terrific boss, Ira Bear, who I love Ira. Ira taught me so much. We were trying to break this story and Ira said, okay, what is it that Troy wants? What does she want? And we all just sat there staring at him. And he said, she wants, oh, hell, I don't know what the heck she wants, because there is no, I really wanted to see more of the world that the Harry Mudds inhabit than the perfect crew of the Enterprise. I would love to have seen a show that's about the people living in the cracks of the Federation, the rogues and the thieves and the con men. I think that could have been a really fun show. That way, if somebody had come to me and said, what would you do for the next Star Trek franchise? I would say, let's do the Harry Mudd version of Star Trek, where they're always trying to put one over on the Federation or hide from the Federation or.
I'm actually curious to go back a little bit to something that you said. So you were saying that for Measure of a Man, it was something that was kind of in production while Gene Roddenberry was unavailable, and he had said that, there wouldn't be lawyers in the 24th century and all of that. So when it actually got made, was there any reaction from him, or did he say anything about it?
No, at that point, once it was done, and the feedback started, then he loved it. But he also told me in a meeting after there were no lawyers, he said, and Data would just be charmed. He would love to be disassembled. He would think this was fascinating. And I said to him, well, excuse me, Mr. Roddenberry, but then we don't have a script.
Yeah.
So And it's funny because David Gerald is a good friend of mine, and the same thing happened on The Trouble with Tribbles. Gene was just burnt out, took a vacation because he didn't like that kind of slapstick funny. And I was on a panel with David. It was David and George Martin and I, and David started telling about how Trouble with Tribbles, they were going to take all the humor out of it, and nobody, Gene didn't like it, and then he went on vacation and they crushed it in and shot it anyway. And George just started howling with laughter and said, David, let her tell you her story about Measure of a Man. And we had exactly the same experience. So, it's funny how across decades, some things don't really change,
Yeah, that's really something. I mean, Measure of a Man is one of my favorite episodes. Trouble with Tribbles is one of my favorite episodes, and it's possible that neither of those might have gotten made if some things were a little different.
No, they probably wouldn't have in a different universe, in a multiverse where Gene didn't get sick or go on vacation. Neither of those episodes would have been made. I love Tribbles. I mean, it will just stop me in my tracks to watch it every time. The charm and just, you got the feeling these people liked each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I missed on Next Generation. I hated the holodeck. I hated it with a passion. I wanted them to decide it caused cancer and get rid of it. I thought it made for lazy writing and lazy storytelling. And it just, I wanted those scenes from original Trek in the rec room where Uhura is singing and Spock is playing the harp. And, there was this sense that these people liked each other and spent time with each other and shared things. And I never really, they all went down to the holodeck and played with themselves, and it made me crazy. And also the first time that thing took over the ship, that would have been it, like rip those out of every ship in the fleet.
Well, so you had mentioned that, things were not the best writing. And so when did you decide to leave? And then what did you do afterwards? What was your next door of opportunity?
My next door of opportunity, I left at the end of the third season. I told them that I, was pretty burnt out and I wanted to go back to New Mexico and write books. And that was my intention, was not to come back to Hollywood, but my agent called and said they'd like to interview you for a show called Reasonable Doubts, and which was a lawyer cop show, and run by Robert Singer. And it starred Mark Harmon and Marlee Maitland.
Yes.
And I came back for the interview, and they hired me, and I loved it. It was a very different experience from Trek in that we always watched dailies together. We were involved in casting on the episodes we wrote. We could go over to the set anytime we felt like. We were seated for the table readings when a new script would come out. We'd get the actors over during their lunch and bring in lunches and have them read the script so we could say, ooh, that line doesn't work. He can't say that line very well. Let's rewrite that. And I loved it. Unfortunately, we got canceled at the end of that second year, that 1 year that I worked with them. But it was, I learned a tremendous amount. Bob Singer, like Ira, had been my mentor on Star Trek. Well, and Ricky and Hans too, to a large degree. I learned how to break stories and really plot. I thought I was good at plotting until I got to Hollywood, and I really didn't know anything. And I learned that on Trek, and I learned so much from Bob Singer. He was very generous to me. He would, Bob was primarily a writer-director. And he would have me come and join him in the editing room and watch while he put together a show while he'd work with the editors. And you can rewrite a show. It's like rewriting a script in the editing room. If there's problems, a good editor can really start cleaning things up. So I learned a tremendous amount from him. And I had a lot of fun. We had a wonderful writing staff. And obviously very talented actors. Marlee was an Academy Award-winning actress, and I really enjoyed doing that. So I did Reasonable Doubts, and then I wrote a bunch of TV pilots that didn't get made, but I had fun writing them. And I worked on Profiler. I was a co-executive producer on Profiler, which was another cop show. and in between did a bunch of scripts for TV pilots, did some freelance scripts for various shows like Sequest and Outer Limits. And actually, I wrote the 2-hour opener for the Outer Limits based on a story by George Martin. So,
well, it sounds like you didn't get back to New Mexico.
As much as I can. I mean, periodically, I still have my house there, and I still think of it as ultimately home. But I divide my time because right now I'm developing a series of books that I co-edit and write for with George Martin called Wild Cards, and I'm developing that for television with Universal Pictures. So, in the throes of that, and have another show I want to pitch to Universal, based on some books I do about a young woman lawyer in a vampire law firm in Manhattan.
Wow.
So hopefully, Wild Cards is farther along, obviously, but hopefully we're going to be on the air with Wild Cards next fall. That's our goal anyway.
Well, I have a couple questions for you about some of the novels that you've written. I noticed that one of the novels that you did was actually a Star Trek original series novel. I think it was in 1984, The Tears of the Singers. So can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah. I wanted to get into writing science fiction, and it was hard to break in. And I was at a science fiction convention, the World Fantasy Convention in Phoenix, and I was introduced to an editor, David Hartwell, who at the time was the editor of the newly launched Star Trek book series. And we talked and had a drink together, and he said, you need to do one science fiction thing, and I like you, and I think you're interesting, and you clearly love Trek. Send me a proposal for a Star Trek book. And it was easy. I picked Uhura because I was a singer, and she was a singer. And I just think she's wonderful. And so I, sat around and I analyzed Trek, and with my friend Victor Milan, and I said, there's like the hard-edged balance of terror, those kind of Trek episodes. And then there are the really slapstick fun ones. And then there's the sort of soft and fuzzy ones. And so I decided to write a soft and fuzzy. And I thought, what is more soft and fuzzy than baby seals? So I came up with the whole plot behind it, and I really enjoyed writing it. But it was interesting. David gave me a piece of advice as he said he was going to buy the book and told me to go write it. He said, this is going to be fun, and have fun doing it. Never do another one. He said, if you do, you will become a tie-in, television or movie tie-in writer, and you'll never have your own career. And so I have faithfully followed that advice, even when I was working on Next Generation, and they called and offered me to write a big Star Trek novel and offered me quite a bit of money. But I said, no, David Hartwell told me to never do that. So thank you, but no.
Yeah,
and I didn't do it. But it was, I'm really glad. And it did help, get me some notice in the field. And then I was able to go on and sell my own books. And so that was, I owe a lot to Star Trek. Star Trek has helped launch a lot of my careers.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely sounds like it.
So besides writing, what else occupies your time? What else do you like to do?
Oh, well, I'm a horsewoman. I'm a dressage rider. I'm an upper level dressage rider. I've been riding since I was 3 years old. And I have 2 beautiful Lusitanos. Lusitano is a Portuguese horse breed. I have a white stallion named Vento de Broja, who is doing the Grand Prix now. He's enormously talented. And I have a young buckskin gelding named Donador, and he's coming along. Donnie had a tough start in life, and he had a lot of different owners, and now I've got him, and he's learning to have a work ethic and enjoy his job. He's a good kid, though. He's going to be fun, and he's 8, and Vento is 14. So I wanted something younger coming up behind my older horse, and I didn't want to wait until I was too old to be riding a young horse because, horseback riding can be dangerous to your health. But I love it, and I'd ride 5 days a week. It's good. I think too many riders spend too much time sitting and being sedentary. And I think that your mind works better when you're physically active. So on the days I don't ride, I go to the gym and I work out there. I love music. I mean, I was a singer. Especially love Broadway. So, every chance I get, I try to go see a Broadway show if I'm in New York, or grab a ticket out here in LA to see something. Music is very important to me. And I guess it's horses, writing, and music are kind of the things. And right now I'm obsessed with politics, which is
politics.
Not a happy place to be living in right now, let me tell you. Yeah, I know. It's like, please don't look at the news or you'll become so angry and upset you won't write. But it's hard not to. So that's sort of my world. And I have very good friends. I mean, I'm hoping to put together a role-playing group again, because I really, really miss that. And it was such a fun way to while away an evening, rolling dice and eating snacks and laughing, and having a good time.
Oh, I just wanted to see, it sounds like we might wrap up in a bit, but Amy or Richard, do you have other questions? No? Okay.
No. So, I mean, like I said, I everything I have was on the high ground, and I'm like, because no, it's no big deal. I mean, it makes sense, because I actually had a couple questions about like what was your inspiration, but behind the episode. But obviously, it's pretty clear when we're given the time of what was going on around the world. I mean, with Ireland and whatnot. It makes more sense. I just figured that, was that story any inspiration to what's going on now in the Middle East? But yeah, like I said, that it really wasn't ramping up back then.
Oh, I think certainly yeah. Well, it was. I mean, there were even 20 years ago, there were beginning hints of the Intifada. I mean, and I think, and this is why I fall back on my love of the law. And I really do love it, even though I don't practice it. If people have no redress, if there is no way to redress the wrongs that have been done to you, then people are going to turn to this asymmetrical form of warfare. And that's why institutions are so vitally important, and why the ability for a society to develop those institutions that we've taken for granted in this country and that are right now under tremendous assault, whether it's the courts or the free press or the bureaucracy for that matter, that, make sure they're not putting tainted milk in the markets and these various things, then there's no way. And so people, resort to violence because they don't see any other alternative. And that was, that's the kind of thing that Star Trek always did so well. And what science fiction does very well. I mean, science fiction enables you to talk about real world, present day problems in a setting that really makes them very relevant. I don't want to say obvious, that's the wrong word, but allows people to discuss these issues in a safer place than if they're talking about it in the real world, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's, partly the books that I'm writing right now. My Imperial series is about a society 500 years in the future. And somebody said to me, interviewing me about the books, that you were writing a space opera that's really about social commentary against the backdrop of, spaceships and space battles and so forth, but you're much more interested in the social commentary, and I am. I think the rights of women can be easily eroded if we don't have the right to control our biology, and how we treat the other is very important to me in an era when we are demonizing the refugee, the immigrant. And so I wanted to write about those things in a science fiction world setting. So I have a society in which the humans are the conquerors. Instead of, the bug-eyed aliens terrorizing the earth, I have the earth people terrorizing the poor bug-eyed aliens and, kicking the hell out of them. So that was what I've done with this book. And then my other books, the Edge series, are about the war between science and rationality and superstition and religion, because you can't be a lover of Star Trek and not love space and science and the real things, how the world really works, whether it's Big Bang Theory or evolution or whatever it is. Facts are facts, science is science. So I wanted to address that in my other series.
So I'm curious, with your background in law, how easy is it for you to write all the technobabble and the science behind it?
I didn't find it that hard. I did find it annoying as hell. We all became very tired of the technobabble because it's an avoidance of actually having people communicate with each other. And we hated it, but I could ram it out there with the best of them because, I read a lot of science books and science articles, stable wormholes and, but of course, much of what we made up was just nonsense, and it would make us crazy on the day after an episode would air, and we'd get all these emails of people saying, well, you said the Rameth ladder didn't do the thing, and it really, and we were like, you realize, of course, this is all made up, right? I'll tell a story on Ron. So one day Ron turned in a script, Ron Moore, and terrific writer, but he had the Geordie technobabble, and Ricky and Hans and Ira and I are reading the script as it came in, and we all burst out laughing almost at the same moment. I could hear Ricky and Hans laughing in the office next to me, and because Ron's technobabble, he had written meaningless backwards. And Geordie says, and then later one of our bosses was going over the scripting, was like, now this is what I'm talking about. This is great. This is what I'm talking about. Now this is some great technobabble. And we're all just sitting there going, oh my God, you idiot. They never knew.
Oh my gosh.
Just wrote meaningless backwards. It got tiresome because, again, I don't want to talk about things that aren't real. I want to talk about things that matter. And Star Trek could have been so brilliant. When we were allowed to do that, then with actors that good, then the show just sang.
Yeah, technobabble is one of those interesting things because I think in Star Trek it's been felt that it's necessary to do that to make it feel kind of real-ish. But yeah, you're just making things up that it isn't going to be that way in the future, right? But you have to make something up that sounds kind of plausible that you can move past, right?
I guess, but I mean, spend less time on it. I mean, we have in my prose writing group, we have this, when somebody will say, well, how does that work? Or why is this, how does this thing happen? And one of our writers said, it's made of plot. And we went, yes, that's it. It's made of plot, and it's fueled by plot. And you try not to spend too much time. Get over those things lightly and move on. Get to the heart of the story. And I think we could have. And again, LeVar is a fantastic actor, and we stuck him with a whole lot of dumb made up words. Instead of letting him act.
So I'm curious to know, do you do any of the circuits or go to Star Trek Las Vegas or any of the conventions?
I don't, actually. I do go to science fiction conventions, but I go to the ones focused more on books and general media rather than just Trek. I went to one, Star Trek, and I was a little shocked. I mean, I come from a different tradition. I come out of science fiction book world. And the idea of people paying for autographs, I mean, I understand for the actors. I absolutely understand why that's a different matter. But for writers, and also I like to actually spend time with fans and with aspiring writers. The thing about the science fiction community is it's the most generous group of people I've ever been with. I mean, as just you can see from my career, it's been the friendship and the helping hand from a lot of more experienced writers that have given me my career. And I think it's important that I do the same to new young writers coming in. And the one time I attended, I got up to give my talk, and I thought I would talk about, how I broke in and about writing a script and what they need to do. And after 15 minutes, they were like, come on, you got to get off the stage. And I was like, but I barely started. And they're like, no, 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 they just want to see you. And now you have to go do autographs. And then people were asking, do you have a headshot that we can buy and get an autograph? And how much do you charge for autographs? And I was like, I don't charge anything. No, I don't have a headshot. I just, and that's frustrating to me, because these people coming there, most of us in science fiction love it and we all want to be part of it. So I would prefer to be at a place where I can, maybe give somebody some information that will help them start their own career. So I haven't done the Trek circuit. And it does feel, you also feel a little, I'm proud of Measure. And my dear friend Lynn Wein, who just recently passed away, Lynn is the creator of Wolverine and Swamp Thing and Nightcrawler and Storm and so many others. And we do have, I had this moment where I said, I'm so well known for something I did 20 years ago. And, it makes me feel like a fraud that I'm dining out on something that I did so long ago. And Lynn said to me, no, he said, I created Wolverine a long time ago too, but I know I did that, and it gave people a lot of pleasure, and you did that, and now you just pay it forward. And it really, kind of helped buck me up and get me back on the horse, as it were, to really get back and say, I'll try to create something that hopefully will be as cool and meaningful in a different way than Measure was. So, and I think that's one reason I don't go, is I'm trying to create something new rather than always, dining out on the past, so to speak.
Well, okay, so I just thought of one question. So you're a role-playing game player, am I right? Is that what you said? Do you have
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a favorite game?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, my heart, I still love Call of Cthulhu because it was the very first role-playing game I ever played in. And a game in which you can go insane is just kind of wonderful. But I was in this group of people who were a bunch of professional writers, many of whom, like myself, had done theater. And so we created our own games. So Walter John Williams ran a Roman campaign, a Roman Republic campaign for 10 years that we played in. We've played, we really like that. I enjoyed Privateers and Gentlemen that Walter invented, which is a game where you're young Navy officers during the heroic age of sail, 1780, to 1820. I just love role-playing games. I loved being able to hang out with friends and create characters. And because we were all frustrated actors, or a lot of us were, it turned into improv every night. And then, of course, there's Superworld that created Wild Cards. Wild Cards, our book series, grew out of Superworld. So George is an old comic book fan, loves them. And Vic, for Christmas one year, gave George this game called Superworld, and we played it obsessively, like 3 and 4 nights a week until 2 and 3 in the morning, where, superheroes having adventures. And George is such an evil game master. He's so mean. Anyway, I know you're shocked after reading Game of Thrones that George would be such a tough game master. But we had so much fun. But George would stay over at my house because rather than drive back to Santa Fe at 3 in the morning, and one morning he came dragging out and he said, there's got to be a way to make money off of this obsession. And so we sat down and we created this shared world anthology, Wild Cards, that's about superheroes in the real world. And I created the Takesians, who test an alien virus on Earth that gives some people superpowers. And book 24 has just been published, and we have 5 more in the pipeline. And I'm working on setting up the TV show. So role playing, it's not a waste of time, kids. Look what can happen. We ended up with a huge book series and potentially a TV show.
Awesome.
So.
Awesome.
Wow, that's amazing.
I still have my dice. I brought my dice to LA with me in search of a gaming group. So I have my D20s and my D10s, and I collect pretty dice.
You can never leave home without yours. Yep.
I can't leave home without your dice.
Can never leave your home.
Yeah, you must have your dice with you. So, no, I was actually guest of honor at a convention in Tucson last month, and they knew I was a role player and that I was missing it from my Facebook page, where I periodically moan about not getting to role play. So 2 nights in a row, they did role playing games that I could play in. One night we played Call of Cthulhu, and the next night we played a Wild Cards game. So I played one of the characters I've created for the book. So it was great fun.
Nice.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so tell us about, I know you've talked about it a little bit, but tell us about any current or upcoming work you'd like to let our listeners know about.
Check out my books. The Edge books are available, and the Imperials books, a second book in the series just came out. It's called In Evil Times. And book 3 has been delivered. I'm writing book 4 right now. It's a 5-book series. I believe in not open-ended things, but telling a coherent story and wrapping it up. I like to plot. And so that's happening. And my work in Wild Cards, I have a story up on Tor.com that you can find. And I'm writing another Wild Card story for one of our upcoming Wild Cards novels. So, our shared world. So those are the main things I'm doing. And of course, I'm doing the Hollywood. It feels like, I'm pushing a boulder up a hill. I feel for Sisyphus, because that's kind of what development in television is like right now, but we are getting there. So those are the things I'm doing.
Excellent. And where can our listeners find you online?
I have a website. I'm very easy to find. I'm the only Melinda Snodgrass in the wild, so melindasnodgrass.com. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a really fun group of people, and we talk about everything from movies and horses to, politics and the art of writing. And, we have a good time. We have a lot of fun. So I'm in both places. I am on Twitter, but I suck at Twitter. I'm just not very good at it. So I generally end up retweeting interesting people. And again, I can be found. I'm MM Snodgrass on Twitter. So I am out there. Not too hard to find, but I feel like Facebook is just right. So if you want to come hang out, come join my crowd on Facebook and read my blog. I do have a website and a blog, so go check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you on Earl Grey.
Well, thank you. It was great fun, and you guys are great interviewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it was incredible interviewing Melinda Snodgrass, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. So many great insights into the next generation, novels she's written, things to look forward to that she'll be working on. And I just wanted to kind of go around with our closing thoughts. Richard.
I thought it was a great interview. Definitely got a little insight of what's going on in the writing room, and I absolutely love hearing that kind of stuff. Obviously, they share the same concerns as us fans too, and that's reassuring to hear that they're all talking about that. So I absolutely love it. I'm excited about. Actually, I just put some of her stuff into my Amazon cart, so definitely I'm gonna check some of that stuff out. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I loved hearing how geeky she is, doing role playing. I mean, just a gal after my own heart. It was so awesome that she truly loves science fiction and started at an early age and continues, writing science fiction and then like a horseman, and just so interesting, her passions and what she loves to do. I just loved getting to know her on a more personal level. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, like you, Richard, I love all these insights into, the behind the scenes and what was it like in the writer's room and, things Gene Roddenberry was asking for. I mean, this is just like the great stuff that we love to hear about, in addition to, watching our beloved episodes, finding out what it took to make that, how it could have taken a different direction. And one of the things I'm definitely going to do is to download that original screenplay of the Ensigns of Command and read it and compare it to the episode, because apparently she had something quite different in mind, and I'm really curious to see what that would have been like. And also one of the things that she mentioned that I'm sure some of our listeners have watched is the extended cut of The Measure of a Man, which has 13 extra minutes. Now, I don't have the Blu-rays yet, so I haven't seen that. But as soon as I can, I'm going to get a hold of it and see that, because I've heard from other people that it enhances the episode and it's even better. And I think it's amazing that she was saying during the process, they knew that there was something special. So they specifically, shot all of that footage, I think even knowing that not all of it would make it in, just to kind of preserve that for the future. So yeah, I think we got some really great insights. It was a great interview, and just wonderful to talk with her. Well, it's been so amazing talking with Next Generation writer Melinda Snodgrass, but that isn't the only thing we've been talking about here on the network. Here's what you might have missed elsewhere on Trek.fm.
Previously on Trek.fm, the 602 Club.
Oh, huge. Tintin, definitely in Europe and in many, many other countries, in Africa and Asia, is really, honestly, as big as James Bond rolled together with Indiana Jones and Superman.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
First of all, it very much hinges on the existence of subspace, which is also a kind of murky sci-fi term that is used in Star Trek to explain how warp drive works and how you can communicate.
The Orb.
And so it makes the relationship between Nog and Jake really important, because I think it does really soften Sisko's heart towards the Ferengi. And I think it does the same thing for Rom. Rom, I think, begins to see the ways in which these Federation types actually are different than most Ferengi to kind of think of them.
Warp 5.
I like to talk about these things. They're not easy to talk about. This is not an easy discussion to have because of so much stuff that's going on in our society right now. And what's been going on for years. Again, that hashtag, the Me Too, it really opened my eyes, and which is what it was supposed to do, right? It's exactly what it was supposed to do.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit that subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or in the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. Now, listeners, we've got until December 31st, and if you leave us a rating and written review, you will be entered into our drawing, and the prize is the Art of Juan Ortiz Next Generation book. This book is amazing. We've been talking about it for a long time, so please go ahead and do that for us, and we will announce the winner in a few weeks.
And Amy, that's for U.S. listeners, right?
Yes, that is correct. We had our last UK iTunes rating and written review last time, so we're alternating. We got you covered.
There you go. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways that you can do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can do that too. Go to Trek.fm/contact, choose to send to a show, and select Earl Grey. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at Trek.fm and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Richard, where can people contact you?
Well, they can find me on the Babel Conference, pop in here and there, and I also am on Twitter. My handle is xransom. Justin, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at TrekFan4747, where I tweet about nothing but Star Trek, and currently tweeting out my Season 4 rewatch of The Next Generation. And you can also find me hanging around the Babel Conference on Facebook. So, Amy, where can people find you?
You can find me here on the network. I'm one of the hosts of The Edge, which is our podcast that covers discovery. And you can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. But my favorite place is hanging out on the Babel Conference.
If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron on the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. Available through our special patrons website, the Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. We'd like to take this opportunity to recognize our current associate producers, Norman Lau, Justin Ozer, and Michael Huter. Thank you for everything you guys are doing to support Earl Grey.
So join us next time for another cup of Earl Grey.
Oh, today is a good day to die!
Great joy and gratitude.
With your help, I am learning.